For those of you that saw my plan that I put out at the start of the month, you may be wondering what this video is. I was going to do something different today, but that video didn't go very well, so I'm going to do that again at some point. However, Google have given me the opportunity to make another video, not in the sense that they sponsored me, but in the sense that they've made one of my old tutorials a little bit redundant. The Google Cloud Developer Console has pretty much completely redone, or has been completely redone, since I did a video on it just 9 months ago, and actually it's probably been redone for about 8 of those. It didn't last very long before getting redone. And I thought, you know, seeing as I've been working on projects again that use the Google OAuth, and I've kind of been on the Google Developers Console a little bit more, I thought I'd make another video updating you with the workflow, because it is a little bit simpler now, which is nice, and it's a little bit easier to use. So I thought I would show it off. So the first thing we need to do is open up our web browser, and we need to go to the Google Developers Console. I need to go to the Google Developers Console here. It should be the first one that comes up. And then I'm going to switch accounts, just so I'm on one with a public email address, because the account that I get signed into by default is a private email address. So I wanted to just switch out that. But you'll end up on this screen no matter what. You'll get a little pop-up asking you to agree to terms and conditions, but that's about it. And then you come to here. For you, it will probably say select project. You come to here, and then you hit new project. And I'm just going to call this video. If you couldn't tell by those names, see, these ones are from the old video, for these ones here, and these ones are from today's recording that didn't go very well, because I've had multiple recordings today that haven't gone very well, but it's fine. We pick ourselves up and we keep going. Now we have our project available, we can hit select project, and we'll be taken to the same screen just for this project instead, so we can see the project we just created is up here. Now we need to enable our APIs, and then you hit this button, or you can hit the library button at the side, and you'll be taken to this. This is a huge API library with an enormous number of APIs. We're going to be using various YouTube APIs today because those are the ones that I personally have experience with. However, every single API is slightly different. The actual creation of, the API credentials should be roughly equivalent. I'm going to show you how to create an API key and an auth client ID, because they are a little bit different. I'm going to start with the API key. For that, we're going to use the YouTube Data API v3, which is a particularly common one. And then we're going to hit enable. And this will enable this API in our project, and then we'll be able to create our credentials from that. There are 2 ways to create credentials. The first of which is by hitting this button up here. The second of which is by going to the credentials menu and clicking create credentials up the top of that menu. You'll see it once I've done this. The flows are slightly different depending on which button you click, which is a bit weird, but I'd recommend clicking this one because it's a little bit easier to work with. So once you get to this screen, you're asked which API you'll be using. This will auto-populate, and you'll be asked what data you'll be accessing. And this is actually different for every API. So if you're using, say, the Maps API, or even the YouTube Analytics API, which we'll be using a little bit later, you're going to see slightly different options here. I'm going to do the public data because this creates an API key rather than an auth client. That's pretty much the only thing that changes. Some stuff in the data API requires an authorization. Most of it doesn't. So we're just going to create a public key like that. Then we hit next. We wait a bit, and it will create our key for us. I'm not going to bother blurring out because I will delete this project before it goes up. Just makes it easier for me. So we can copy our key, we can put it in a file, which I would actually recommend doing. Don't put it just in your code as plain text. That's not secure at all. And then we just hit done. And we're done, and we get brought back to this page. You can also look at your credentials here as well in the credential screen. This is the one I was talking about up here, this create credentials button. But we're going to be using a different API to talk about auth stuff. You then also have your auth consent screen, which we don't need to worry about right now. You have your domain verification, which I don't really know what it does, and your page user agreements. If you have any agreements that you've signed in order to use things. The APIs I've worked with haven't needed any of that. So we're actually going to create a second project, and I'm going to show you how to do your OAuth client ID, because a lot of APIs need OAuth at some stage. The Analytics API, which is the one that I'm particularly familiar with, actually requires OAuth for every single request you make. So we hit Enable APIs and Services once again. We then get to search. I'm going to just search Analytics. That's not going to work. Okay, I'm just going to put YouTube. And it's the Analytics API we're wanting. And then I'm going to hit Enable once again. And then once that's enabled, it'll bring us to our other screen. So this time we're going to create our OAuth client ID. And then we're going to use the same button up here to create credentials. And you'll see that these two options are different. You now have user data or application data. I'm going to hit user data for this because it will create an OAuth client. We'll hit next. And then it's going to ask us to configure our consent screen. So the app name, we're going to call just video example, I suppose. The user support email is going to be carbro.business@gmail.com. That is the actual public business email address, so that's fine. And then carbro.business@gmail.com for developer contact information as well. This can be different if you want it to be, but I just leave it the same. We're going to hit save and continue. Now, if you were doing it from the credentials and then going up here to where the create credentials would be, you would do this bit separately. It's somewhat weird. I might show you a little bit. But now we have our scopes, so we can avoid using scopes if we want to. However, we do want to add them in our case. In the case of the YouTube Analytics API, it is literally the last scope available. So we need these final two. And then we're going to hit update. And then one of them is a non-sensitive scope, so just viewing reports. And then our sensitive scopes is to view monetary data as well. And then we hit save and continue. And then we select the application type. Now, this really depends what you're building. If you're building something that you're just going to be using on the command line, then you want desktop app. So that's basically anything that you use on the computer. So for example, like a CLI or GUI kind of thing, you would choose this. If you're building a web application, you would choose this, and this would then prompt you to create a redirect URL and everything. But we're just going to select desktop app here. And then we're going to call our client video tests. I just always call it the same as the product name. And then we're going to hit create. And then we're given our client ID, and we hit this download button. And we can download our secrets file onto the computer, which I'm actually going to do, and I'm going to show you what's in there. First I'm going to hit done. And then that's now everything created. So if we go back into credentials, we can see this video test is here, and we can download our files from here if you want to. We can edit them if you want to, or we can delete them if you want to. So if you were to go into create credentials and you hadn't configured your client auth screen yet, then you'd be told to do that, and then it would be a slightly separate process. But it's largely the same fields that you have to fill in. It's just a slightly different UI. It's really weird, but that's how it goes. So if I open up this JSON, you can see what's in it. And if I kind of indent it so it's a bit easier to read. So these are our OAuth secrets. This is everything you need to authorize your project through the OAuth consent system. So you have your client ID, which is just this huge long thing. You then have your project ID, which I don't really know how it's generated. I do have other ones where the project ID was set to a name. The last few I've made have just had random names, so I don't know if that's what they do anymore. Google changed so many things and don't tell you about it. It's difficult to keep up sometimes. You have your auth URI. So this URI is what you would send, or what you would append different things to actually initiate an authorization request. I might do a separate video on that at some point. I'm kind of thinking about it since I've kind of streamlined and improved the system that I use personally. So I'll probably do a video on that in more detail, but this is what you would use to initiate an authorization request to get an authentication code. Then this is the URL that you would add some query strings to to exchange that code for a token. It's a complicated system. This I have absolutely no idea. I just leave that alone. Client secret, this is just kind of a token kind of thing. And then you have your redirect URIs. In this case, we just have HTTP localhost. So if you wanted to authorize on, using a desktop, you would create a web server and you would listen for a request back. If you created a web client, then you'd be told to provide a redirect URI. I tried to see URI and URL at the same time there. That didn't work, but it's a URI, and that would go in here instead. I don't know if there are any differences between any others. I've only seen installed and web, and they both have the same thing. It's just that this changes. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that you need to know in order to create and authorize a request for a Google project. I might do a video. I probably will do a video some other Friday that I need to plan out, where I kind of cover how you can create an OAuth authentication system and exactly what you can do about that. So if you want to see that video, do let me know. In the meantime, if you like this video, consider liking it to let me know, and subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. If you have any ideas about what you want me to do in future videos, then feel free to leave a comment down below. I read every single one, so the feedback would be good to hear. If you want to support this channel monetarily, you can do so in one of two ways. The first of which by hitting the join button down below to become a YouTube member. The second of which by clicking a link in the description to become a patron. £1 a month on either and you can be on this screen like these people. And I will see you in the next video, which I believe is on creating command line interfaces with ArgParse. And the Monday after that will be with Click. So you'll get two different perspectives there. So I'll see you for those.